"You have nothing here, Cordelia. You never did." Those were the last words her husband said to her, after 23 years of marriage, spoken in a voice colder than any winter she had ever known. And just like that, at 52 years old, Cordelia Marwood was standing on a sidewalk in suburban Virginia, with one squeaking suitcase, a plastic bag of mismatched essentials, $92 in her pocket, and a phone battery at 38%. Across the street, her neighbor froze mid-sweep. The broom hung in the air, watching, the way strangers watch a car accident. But Cordelia did not look back at the house, because looking back would mean seeing the wreckage, and she did not have the strength left for that. The afternoon sun pressed down on her shoulders. 3 o'clock, hot, indifferent. Dust motes danced in the air around her, like tiny witnesses, watching but saying nothing. She forced her feet to move, one step, then another. The wheels of her suitcase clicked against the cracked sidewalk, a rhythm, a small, pathetic music. She walked to the end of the block, turned the corner. There stood the old oak tree, the one she had helped plant flowers around 12 years ago, when she still believed in things. She leaned her back against the rough bark, closed her eyes, took 3 deep breaths, and only then did she let herself feel it. The hollowness, like a giant invisible hand had reached into her chest, grabbed everything that mattered, and squeezed until there was nothing left. She thought about him. Garrett, 23 years of him, the man she had cooked for, cleaned for, apologized to, listened to, the man she had built her entire identity around. She thought about the morning he had sat across from her at breakfast, reading his newspaper, sipping his coffee, just like every morning, as if today were nothing. Then he had folded the paper, set it down, and looked at her with eyes she had never seen before. "We need to talk." 3 words, a door closing. He had walked her to the antique bureau in the study, the one his grandfather had built, the one she had polished every Sunday for 2 decades. And then he had done something she did not know was possible. He had pressed a hidden panel. A drawer slid open, a drawer she had never known existed. 23 years of marriage, and there were drawers in her own house she did not know existed. Inside that drawer were papers, stamped, notarized, signed. With a finality that made her stomach turn, he pushed them toward her. "Sign these final releases, or leave with exactly what you're carrying right now." Cordelia had stared at him, the man she shared a bed with, the man whose laundry she had folded 3 days ago, the man who suddenly looked like a stranger wearing her husband's face. "Garrett, what is this?" "It's the truth, Cordelia. The house is mine. The land is mine. The accounts are mine. They have been mine for 15 years. She had blinked. 15 years. I moved everything into a private trust long before today. I'm a businessman. I plan ahead. His voice had no anger in it, no cruelty. That was the worst part. He spoke to her the way you speak to a vendor whose contract has expired. Sign them, or you walk out with what you can carry. And she had signed, not out of weakness, but because the ice in his eyes told her staying was more dangerous than leaving. Now she stood under the oak tree. 20 minutes later, a woman with no house, no bank account, no name on any deed, 52 years old, a ghost in her own life. She pulled out her phone, stared at the contact list. The screen dimmed. She tapped it back to life. Her sister Rosalind lived 300 miles away, 2-bedroom apartment in Pennsylvania. Husband, 3 teenagers, already at capacity. Her daughter Briar lived in Richmond, a studio apartment. A boyfriend Cordelia had never trusted, a girl who lived paycheck to paycheck. She scrolled, hesitated, tapped Briar's name. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Mom, what's up?" I'm right in the middle of a shift. Cordelia opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Mom? Briar, your father put me out. Silence. A long silence. The kind that carries weight. What do you mean, like, for a walk? Cordelia closed her eyes harder. No, I mean I'm on the sidewalk. With a suitcase. The house was never mine. I have nowhere to go. More silence. Behind it, the muffled clatter of a busy restaurant. Someone laughing. A glass breaking. Mom, I'm at work. I can't talk about this right now. Can I call you back tonight? Yes, you can call me back. The line went dead. 2 hours passed. She found a cheap motel near the interstate, the kind of place that smelled like industrial lemon cleaner and cigarettes from the 1990s. Mustard-colored walls, a bedspread with a stain she did not want to think about. She sat on the edge of the bed, counted the money in her wallet again. $92. The phone rang. Briar. Mom? I'm here, sweetheart. Listen. I've been thinking about what you said, and I want to help. I really do. But things are tight here. Rent is behind. Tyler lost his overtime hours. And the studio. Mom, it barely fits 2 people. Cordelia did not say anything. You're going to be okay, though. Right? A pause. You always find a way, Mom. You're the strongest person I know. Cordelia stared at the mustard-colored wall. She wanted to say something. Anything. She wanted to scream into the phone. No, Briar, I am not the strongest person you know. I am tired. I am bleeding inside. I need my daughter. Instead, she said, Thank you, baby. I love you. And she hung up. She sat there for a long time, wondering when being strong had stopped being a choice and started being a biological requirement. She slept badly. Of course she did. At 3 in the morning, she got up, walked to the cracked motel mirror, turned on the dim yellow bulb above it, and she looked at herself. Really looked. For the first time in 23 years. She saw a woman in her early 50s, hair faded, eyes tired, a face that had been trained to smile at men who didn't deserve smiles. She saw a wife, a mother. She did not see Cordelia, because Cordelia had been buried somewhere. A long time ago, she whispered to the woman in the mirror, Who are you? The woman in the mirror did not answer, because she did not know yet. The next morning, the phone rang. Roslyn. Her sister's voice was sharp, furious, the kind of fury that cuts through grief like a knife through old rope. Della, I just heard from Briar. Rose. And then I called that miserable man you call a husband, got nothing but his voicemail, where I left him a message I will not repeat in polite company. Cordelia almost smiled. Almost. Della. Listen to me. I've been thinking all night. We don't have room here. Adam's back is acting up again. The boys are wall to wall. But there is one thing. Rose, do you remember Daddy's old place? Cordelia stopped breathing for a second. The Montgomery farm. Yes. Up in the hills, 40 miles outside of Scranton. 18 acres of stubborn earth. Della, it's been empty for over a decade. But the taxes have been paid out of the estate account every single year. The deed is sitting in my drawer. Half of it is yours. Cordelia closed her eyes. The image came back to her, slowly, like a photograph developing in a chemical bath, a sagging porch, a stone chimney, a pump handle in the kitchen, a father with dirt under his fingernails. Rose. The last time we were there was for the funeral, 14 years ago. The house was falling apart back then. It's a roof, Della. It's ugly. It's old. It probably needs 1,000 repairs, but it is half yours. Cousin Adam went up there 2 years ago to check the fence lines. He said the structure is still standing. The bones are good. A long pause. It's better than a motel, Della. It's better than a park bench. Cordelia stared at the mustard wall. She had no other cards. She had no other names on any deeds in this entire country. Except one. Montgomery. Okay, Rose. Okay. The bus ride to northern Pennsylvania took nearly 7 hours. She sat by the window, watched Virginia's lush greens slowly give way to something rougher, rockier, older. The Appalachian foothills rose around the highway like the spines of sleeping animals. She felt something happening to her, a stripping away. Not a bad feeling, just different, like layers of paint being scraped off a piece of wood to find the grain underneath. She thought about her father, Henry Montgomery, a soft-spoken man, and a man of many silences. He had spent weeks at a time on that farm when she and Roslyn were children, always claiming he was mending fences or checking soil. He would come home with dirt under his fingernails, and a quiet satisfaction in his eyes she had never understood. He had never made the farm profitable, not in any way that the bank could measure, and yet they had never wanted for anything. He had always been able to find the money for a new roof, for Roslyn's college tuition, for Cordelia's wedding dress, money that seemed to come from thin air. She had never asked where it came from. She had been a daughter. Daughters did not ask. She wondered now. For the first time in her life, she wondered. The bus pulled into the small town of Clear Creek on a Wednesday afternoon. The sky was the color of wet slate. The air smelled like coming rain and old leaves. A local taxi driver picked her up, a man with a weathered face. He had the kind of eyes that had seen many things and did not need to talk about any of them. He drove her the final 5 miles out to the old Montgomery property. When he pulled up at the rusted iron gate, he looked at her suitcase, then at the empty road behind them, then at her. "You sure about this, ma'am?" "I'm sure. There hasn't been a soul out here in years. Nearest neighbor's a good 3 miles back." "I know." He nodded, did not push. She paid him with 2 of her precious bills. He tipped his hat, drove away. The taillights disappeared around the bend, and then it was just her, and the gate, and the silence. The gate groaned in protest as she pushed it open, a high metallic shriek echoing across the valley. She walked the final half-mile up the dirt drive, the wheels of her suitcase clicking rhythmically against the stones. When the house came into view around a bend in the overgrown path, she stopped dead. It was worse than she remembered. A shutter hung by a single hinge. The front porch sagged like a tired old dog. One of the windows was broken. A sheet of plastic flapped against the frame, but the chimney still stood. Tall, stone, defiant against the gray sky, and for the first time since Garrett had thrown her out, for the first time in 3 days, Cordelia cried. Not for the house she had lost, but for the exhaustion of being the woman who always finds a way. She cried for the 23 years she had spent building a life on shifting sands, only to discover that her father had left her a foundation of solid stone. After a few minutes, she wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked but held. The door wasn't even locked. The wood had swollen so much from years of humidity that it was jammed into the frame. She had to throw her shoulder against it twice before it gave way with a violent thud. Inside, the air was thick. Dust, old paper, damp wood, the faint smell of a roof that had given up one of its shingles to the last winter storm. She stood in the entryway, listening. The silence was different here, not empty, full, like the silence inside a church. She walked through the house slowly, the kitchen, the cast-iron stove, rusted but intact, the hand pump at the sink. She pumped it once, twice, 5 times, 12 times, and then a stream of cold, clear water. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. Mountain water. After all these years, the mountain had been kinder to her than her own family. In the parlor, an old armchair sat under a sheet. Fading wallpaper peeled in soft curls. A framed photograph hung crooked on the wall. Her father, her mother, a summer day, all 3 of them younger than memory could hold. She straightened the frame. It felt important, somehow. In the master bedroom, she found an iron bed frame. The mattress had been carried away long ago, but the frame was solid. The springs were intact. She would sleep here. She folded her winter coat into a pillow, spread her sweaters across the springs. It would have to do. For dinner that first night, she ate a tin of sardines, some crackers from the bus station, washed it down with metallic-tasting water from the pump, and as the sun went down behind the ridge, plunging the valley into a deep velvet darkness, she sat by the window and watched the stars come out. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket, both protective and terrifying. She fell asleep with her boots still on. The next 4 days passed in a blur of basic survival. She found an old broom in the pantry, swept years of cobwebs from the corners, dead insects, mouse droppings, the brittle skeletons of forgotten things. She scrubbed the kitchen floor on her hands and knees until the linoleum showed its original pale blue pattern, a pattern her mother had probably stood on 40 years ago. Her hands blistered. Her back ached. She did not care. She used a roll of heavy plastic and some duct tape to seal the broken window in the parlor. Cousin Adam had left a few supplies in the shed 2 years ago. Bless him. By the 3rd night, the house began to feel like a place. Not a home, not yet, but a place, a shelter, a piece of the world where her name was not being erased. It was on the 4th day that she found the first strange thing. She had taken an old rusted machete from the tool shed. She wanted to clear the path to the creek. The waist-high weeds had swallowed it completely. She hacked her way through the brush. Sweat ran down her back. Her arms ached. The machete was dull and heavy and cruel. But she kept going, because moving forward was the only direction she had left. Near the back fence line, she stopped. Something was wrong. Or not wrong. Different. A patch of ground about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide, where the grass grew thin, where the soil looked darker, almost black, compared to the rocky clay all around it. She stood there, the machete resting against her leg. A trench. That was what it looked like. A trench that had been dug, and then filled in, and then forgotten. Too regular to be a collapsed animal burrow, too deliberate to be erosion. She told herself it was probably an old irrigation attempt. Her father had been stubborn about water, she told herself. But she did not quite believe it. She kept walking toward the creek, 20 yards farther. And then, hidden behind a thicket of blackberry brambles, half buried in moss and vines, a low concrete structure, no more than a foot above the ground, with a heavy mossy lid, like a miniature bunker, or a very small reinforced root cellar. She approached it carefully. Her heart was suddenly loud in her ears. She tapped the lid with the handle of the machete. The sound that returned was deep, hollow, vibrated up through her boots and into her bones. She tried to lift the lid. It did not move. It did not even pretend to move. She stood there in the late afternoon light, listening to the creek run somewhere beyond the brambles, and she felt, for the first time in her life, that her father had been a man she did not actually know. That night, sleep would not come. She kept thinking about him, Henry Montgomery, the soft-spoken father, the man who trusted the earth more than the banks, the man who had spent weeks at a time on this farm, always claiming, always coming home with dirt under his fingernails. Always. She remembered the satisfaction in his eyes. She had thought it was just a farmer's contentment. Now she wondered. She wondered what kind of man builds a concrete bunker behind blackberry brambles and tells no one for 30 years. She got up, lit a kerosene lamp she had found in the pantry, walked into her father's old wardrobe. The wood was warped. The doors creaked. She ran her hand along the back panel, a loose board. She pulled it. Behind it, a small, leather-bound book. She brought it to the kitchen table, opened it. Most of the pages were blank, but on the last written page in her father's slanting, irregular hand were the words, "Della will understand. When the time comes, the land will speak to her. Ask Ruth." She read those words 100 times. She did not understand them, but she was beginning to feel that she would, soon. On the 5th morning, she walked the 3 miles to town. Clear Creek was a small place, a general store, a post office, a diner, a gas station with one pump, the kind of town where everyone's grandfather had known everyone else's grandfather. She entered the general store. A bell chimed above the door. The owner looked up from a crate of apples. He was an old man, late 60s or early 70s, thick spectacles, hands that had handled a lot of life. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. She picked up a few essentials: flour, coffee, a small box of nails, a pound of cheese. She set them on the counter, and before she could lose her nerve, she said, "Mr. Briggs?" He looked surprised that she knew his name. "That's me. My name is Cordelia Marwood, but I was born Cordelia Montgomery." The old man went very still. His hand stopped halfway to the cash register. "Henry's daughter?" "Yes." "The one who went down south?" "Yes." A long pause. He set the bag of coffee down on the counter. Slowly, like it was suddenly heavier than it had been a moment ago. Lord. He took off his glasses, wiped them on his shirt, put them back on. "Your father was one of the most soft-spoken men in this county. Came in here every Saturday morning for 30 years, never said much, but his word was as good as gold." Cordelia felt something rise in her chest, something she did not have a name for. "You knew him well?" "As well as anyone could, which wasn't much." He almost smiled. "You moving back into the old place?" "For now, I'm trying to get it back on its feet." He nodded slowly. "You looking to farm it?" "I don't know yet. I'm figuring things out." He looked at her then. Really looked at her, the way old men look at people, with years of unspoken understanding behind their eyes. "You're going to need help up there. That place hasn't seen a man's hands in a long time." "I know. There's a young fella around here, Theron Vaughn, 32, did 2 tours overseas, Iraq, came back with a careful way about him. Doesn't say much, but he's good with his hands, good with a shovel, keeps his mouth shut. He does odd jobs for folks. I can send him your way tomorrow if you want." Cordelia hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." She paid for her items. The bag was heavy in her hands. She turned to leave. That was when Mr. Briggs leaned forward over the counter. His voice dropped. "Mrs. Marwood." She turned back. He was looking at her with a different expression now, careful, almost worried. "There was a man in here 2 weeks ago, asking questions about your father's land." Cordelia stopped breathing. "What kind of man?" "City man. Not from around here. Suit. Black SUV. Asked a lot of questions about the Montgomery property. Asked if it was still in the family." What did you tell him? Nothing. Nothing worth knowing. She stared at him. Mr. Briggs, I only arrived 4 days ago. I know. He came 2 weeks ago. I know. A long silence. The bell on the door jingled as another customer entered. Mr. Briggs straightened up. His professional smile returned, as if he had not just dropped a small bomb at her feet. Well, Mrs. Marwood, you let me know if you need anything else, and I'll send Theron up tomorrow morning. Mr. Briggs? Yes, ma'am. She hesitated. My father. Did he ever mention a friend named Ruth? The old man's expression softened. Ruth Pemberton. Yes, she was your daddy's oldest friend. 50 years they knew each other. She still lives at the end of the old logging road. Last house before the trees take over. Is she still? Sharp as a tack, 78 years old. Doesn't get around much anymore, but her mind is intact. You should go see her. Cordelia nodded. She did not say anything else. She walked out of the store and into the gray afternoon light. She walked the 3 miles back to the farm slowly. Her bag of supplies grew heavier with each step, but her thoughts grew heavier still. Someone had been asking about her father's land. 2 weeks ago, before she had even known she would come here, before Garrett had even thrown her out. She turned the thought over in her mind like a stone she had pulled from a riverbed. How? How could anyone have known? Unless someone had been planning this. The way Garrett had planned the trust, 15 years in advance. She stopped walking. The bag of supplies hung from her hand. She thought about Garrett's face when he had pushed those papers across the bureau. The complete absence of emotion. The professional stillness of a man closing a deal he had been working on for a long time. And then she thought, what if the deal wasn't only about the marriage? What if the deal had always been about the land? She stood in the middle of the dirt road. The wind moved through the pines above her. A crow called from somewhere far away. Her father had hidden a concrete bunker behind blackberry brambles. For reasons she did not yet understand. A man in a black SUV had been asking about the property. 2 weeks before she had even known she would come here. A 78-year-old woman she had never met was waiting at the end of a logging road. Her father's oldest friend. And Garrett Marwood, the man she had married at 29, had spent 15 years preparing to take everything from her. But he had not taken this. He had not been able to take this. Because this stubborn, rocky earth had never been his to take. It had her name on it. The name she had been born with. Montgomery. That night, Cordelia sat on the sagging porch of the old farmhouse. The sun went down behind the ridge. The stars came out one by one, the way they always did, the way they would. Long after she was gone, long after Garrett was gone, long after everyone was gone. She wrapped her arms around herself. The mountain air was cool. The stars above the ridge were white and bright and very, very old. She thought of the woman she had seen in the motel mirror 3 nights ago, the woman who did not know who she was. Cordelia did not cry tonight. Tonight, for the first time in many days, she did something else. She made a fist, a small one, quiet, in her lap, the kind of fist a woman makes when she has decided that she is not finished yet. The morning came soft and gray. Cordelia woke before the sun, the way she had been waking for 40 years. Some habits do not leave a woman just because her marriage does. She made coffee on the cast-iron stove. It tasted like smoke and metal and survival. She drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the mist roll off the ridge. And then she walked down the dirt drive, past the rusted gate, onto the old logging road that wound up into the trees, past the stand of birches her father had planted 40 years ago, past the broken stone wall a neighbor had built before she was born. The road got rougher, narrower, the trees pressed in, and at the end of it, just before the forest swallowed everything, a small wooden house came into view. Painted blue. Once. Now it was the color of a memory. A garden in front. Roses. Real roses. Old climbing roses with thorns the size of fingernails, the kind that grow when someone has loved them for 50 years. A figure on the porch. A woman in a wicker chair, wrapped in a wool shawl despite the warmth. Her hair was white as bone. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was looking right at Cordelia, as if she had been waiting for a very long time. Cordelia stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She did not know what to say. The old woman looked at her, and tears began to slide down her face. Quiet, not sad, just full. Henry's girl. Yes. You came back. Yes. Took you long enough. A small laugh escaped Cordelia, surprised, watery. The old woman patted the chair beside her. Come up here, Della. Come sit with me. Her name was Ruth Pemberton. She was 78 years old. Her hands shook a little, not from fear, from age, from the small earthquakes the body holds when it has lived a long time. But her eyes were sharp, the kind of sharp that does not happen by accident. She poured tea from a chipped porcelain pot. Her hands trembled. The cup rattled against the saucer. She did not apologize for it. Cordelia liked her immediately. Your father told me you would come. When? Many times, over many years. Ruth smiled at something Cordelia could not see. He used to sit in that chair you're in now, every Sunday afternoon for 30 years. He would drink my tea, tell me about his roof, his chickens, his granddaughter. And every single Sunday before he left, he would say the same thing. She paused. Cordelia waited. He would say, Ruth, when Della comes back, you'll know what to do. And I would say, Henry, what makes you think she'll come back? And he would smile that quiet smile of his, and he would say, because the land remembers her name. Cordelia could not speak. The cup shook in her hand. Ruth, why didn't I know about you? Because your father was a man of compartments, like a steamer trunk, each thing in its own drawer, each drawer locked tight. He didn't want the locks to leak. That sounds lonely. It was, but he chose it, and I respected the choice. A pause. He was a good man, Della. Not a perfect man. Not a loud man. Not a man you could brag about at a dinner party. But a good man, the rarest kind. Tell me about him, please. Ruth set down her teacup. She looked out at the roses. Your father loved a woman before your mother. Cordelia stopped breathing. Her name was Marion. They were going to be married. He was 25. She was 24. She got sick in the spring of 1962. She was gone by the fall. I didn't. I never knew. Of course you didn't. He never spoke of her after she died, not even to me. Not for years. But I knew. I had known her too. We were schoolgirls together. A long silence, the kind of silence that holds something heavy and does not flinch. That is when your father learned, too early, too cruelly, that everything beautiful in this world can be taken from you. And once a man learns that lesson, Della, really learns it, he never quite trusts beauty again. He hides it. He buries it. He builds walls around it to protect it from whatever comes next. Cordelia thought of the concrete bunker behind the blackberry brambles, the lid she could not lift, the trench in the back field, and suddenly she understood, or she was beginning to. Ruth, there is a concrete structure behind the brambles, by the creek. The old woman nodded slowly. I know. Do you know what's in it? I have an idea. Tell me. Ruth turned her head, looked at Cordelia for a long moment, the kind of look that measures something. I'll tell you, but not today, child. Today is for tea, and for sitting. Some truths have to wait until they are ready, and until you are ready for them. Ruth, tomorrow. Tomorrow you bring that young man your father wanted you to find. Tomorrow you open the lid. And whatever is inside that lid, Della, whatever it is, you bring it back to me. And then we will talk. Cordelia opened her mouth. She closed it. She nodded. Because there are moments in a woman's life when an older woman tells her the order of things, and you do not argue. You listen. Theron Vaughn arrived at 9 the next morning. His pickup truck was the color of rust and prayer, both held together by hope. He stepped out, tall, 32, broad shoulders, a scar across the back of his left hand, eyes that did not waste time looking at things they did not need to look at. He nodded once. Ma'am. Theron, thank you for coming. Mr. Briggs said you had something heavy to lift. I do. He pulled tools from the bed of his truck. A crowbar, a pry bar, a sledgehammer, a heavy-duty flashlight. He moved without wasted motion. A man who had unloaded equipment in worse places, with worse stakes. She led him to the back of the property, through the cleared path, past the trench, through the brambles she had cut yesterday with bleeding hands. And there it was, the concrete lid. Theron stopped, whistled low. That is high-grade concrete, ma'am. Is it? That is not the kind of stuff you mix in a bucket. That is engineered, reinforced, probably steel rebar inside. Why would my father build something like this? To last. How long? A century, maybe more. He knelt down, ran a gloved hand along the seam where the lid met the base. He looked up at her. Mrs. Marwood, whoever built this did not build it for a passing season. They built it for somebody to find. Eventually. Just not soon. She crossed her arms tight against her chest. Then let's find what they wanted me to find. The lid did not give easily. Theron worked for nearly an hour. The crowbar bent slightly. The pry bar slipped twice. He paused once to wipe his face with his shirt. She watched him work. She thought about her father. A man who had buried something so deep that 30 years and a stranger with a crowbar could barely uncover it. A man who had loved her quietly, the way some men love, without speaking the words, because the words felt too small. Then, a scrape, a grinding sound. The lid shifted. Theron braced his legs, heaved. The slab slid sideways with a long stone groan. A smell rose up from the dark hole, not rot. Old earth, cold metal, dry paper. The smell of patience. Theron clicked on the flashlight, aimed it down. He went very still. Then he stepped back and handed her the flashlight. This one is yours, ma'am. Inside the bunker, a galvanized metal box the size of a footlocker. Heavy, ringed with rust along the seams. Beside it, 2 long cylinders, wrapped in thick yellowed plastic. Cordelia knelt at the edge of the hole. Her heart was loud, loud enough to drown out the wind through the pines. Theron lifted the metal box first. It clinked, solid objects shifting inside. He set it gently on the ground beside her. Then the cylinders. Carefully, as if they might break or wake up. He stepped back. Ma'am, I will be on the porch. This is private. He left without another word, the kind of man who knew when to disappear. Cordelia carried the items back to the kitchen alone. She set the metal box on the table where her mother had once rolled out pie dough. She unwrapped the cylinders carefully. Her hands shook. The cylinders held maps, topographical maps, hand-drawn surveys, chemical analysis sheets from a laboratory in Scranton, dated 1982. She set them aside. She looked at the metal box. The latches were rusted shut. She found a kitchen knife. She worked the blade against the rust until the latches snapped open one at a time. She lifted the lid, and her breath caught. Stacks of currency, old $20 bills, old $50 bills, bound with twine. Not millions, but thousands, more than she had ever seen in one place in her life. A leather-bound ledger, a small velvet pouch tied with string, and a thick envelope with her name on it, in her father's slanting, irregular hand. Della. She sat down. Her knees just stopped holding her up. She picked up the envelope. The paper was thick, yellowed, heavy with the weight of 14 years of silence. She slid her thumb under the flap. 3 pages, folded with care. Her father's handwriting filled them edge to edge. She began to read. Della, if you are reading this letter, then the world out there has not been as kind to you as I hoped it would be. I am sorry for that. I always knew you would be the one to come back. Rosalind has the city in her blood. But you, Della, you always understood the silence of the hills. I have a secret to tell you, one I could not tell your mother. God rest her soul. When I bought this farm in 1974, I paid for 18 acres. 3 years later, I had a man named Pete Brennan come out and run a private survey. The fence lines did not match the spine of the mountain. They never had. The county's records were old and had been copied wrong somewhere along the way. Pete found something. There are 8 extra acres on the other side of the creek, hidden behind the ridge. They had never been recorded, never been taxed, never been claimed. They sat there in the gap of the paperwork, waiting, the way some things wait. I did not record it either. I was afraid the county would find a way to tax me out of existence. I was afraid the neighbors would start a feud. I was afraid of every man who has ever wanted something he did not earn. But Della, there is more. She paused, took a breath. The kitchen felt very still. Outside on the porch, she could hear Theron shifting his weight. He was a careful man, but he was there. She read on. Pete Brennan was a miner before he was a surveyor. He took one look at the soil on those 8 acres and his face changed. He told me the rock there was different. High-grade calcite, limestone so pure it could be used for the finest cement, for specialty industrial applications, for things I do not understand and never tried to. He called it white gold. I had the lab in Scranton confirm it in 1982. The reports are in the cylinder you found, every page, sealed, notarized, real. I never tore the mountain open while I was alive. I did not have the heart for it, and I did not want the big companies coming in to rip the valley apart for what they could carry off. But over the years, I sold small loads to local contractors. By hand, with a borrowed truck and a bad back. Quiet sales, cash, nothing on paper. That is where the money came from, Della. That is how I paid for Rosalind's college, and your wedding dress, and the new roof. All those years your mother thought we had a guardian angel. It was just me, with a shovel, and a secret. I am sorry I never told you. I told myself it was to protect you. The truth is, I did not know how to talk about anything that mattered. A tear hit the page. She did not know when she had started crying. She lifted the page so the tear would not smear the ink. Della, listen to me now, even if my voice is dead and the ink is faded. I am not leaving you money. I am leaving you land. Money can be taken from a woman, by a husband, by a lawyer, by a court, by a clever man with paper. Land is harder. Land does not lie. Land does not forget who walked on it. Land remembers. If you ever find yourself with your back against the wall, and Della, if you are reading this letter, you already do, use this. Use what I left for you. Do not let the sharks take it for nothing. This land is your shield, my girl. And one more thing. Go see Ruth. Bring her this letter. She has something for you that I could not leave in a metal box. Some things have to be carried in human hands. I love you, Della. I always have. I just never knew how to say it loud enough. Dad, she set the letter down. She put her face in her hands, and she wept, not the sharp grief of fresh loss. He had been gone 14 years. The sharpness had worn down long ago. She wept for a different thing. She wept for all the years she had not understood him, for the dirt under his fingernails, for the satisfaction in his eyes, for the Sundays at Ruth's kitchen table, for the hours alone in this farmhouse, for a man who had carried so much for so long, without ever asking anyone to share the weight. She wept because, for the first time in her life, she felt seen by a dead man, when the living one she had married had spent 15 years preparing to erase her. She sat there for a long time. Eventually, she opened the velvet pouch, a pocket watch, her grandfather's. She remembered it from her childhood. The tick was gone now, but the engraving on the back was still legible. Tempus dat, tempus offert. Time gives, time takes away. She closed her hand around it. She did not need to ask why he had left it. Theron drove her back to Ruth Pemberton's house. She held the letter in her lap. She did not speak. Theron did not ask. The truck rattled up the logging road. The pines closed in on either side. The world felt very small and very large. At the same time, when they reached the blue house, Cordelia turned to him. "Theron, will you wait? I think I will need a ride home." "Yes, ma'am." "And Theron?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." He nodded. The kind of nod a man gives when he understands he has just helped pull something important out of the ground. Ruth was on the porch. She had been waiting. She saw the letter in Cordelia's hand, and her old eyes filled with tears. "You opened it." "I opened it." "And you came back." "He told me to." Ruth nodded, slowly. "Sit down, Della." Cordelia sat. The wicker chair creaked beneath her. Ruth stood up, slowly, the way old women stand, hand on the armrest, a pause to gather the body, a second to find balance, and then forward, into the house. She came back a few minutes later, carrying a wooden box, polished cherry wood, the size of a thick book. She set it on the small table between them. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and said, "Your father gave me this box 26 years ago. He told me to keep it. He told me one day his daughter would walk up that road, and on that day I was to give it to her." Cordelia stared at the box. "What's in it?" "Letters, many of them. From Henry. Over 30 years. "Letters? About what?" "About everything. About the land, about the calcite, about Pete Brennan, about every load he ever sold and to whom, about the dates, the amounts, the names, the receipts." She paused. "And every single document, Della, every survey, every lab report, every deed correction Henry meant to file but never did. All of them. Notarized, witnessed, stamped, properly executed." Cordelia's mouth went dry. "Notarized? Yes. By whom?" Ruth almost smiled. "Different notaries, over many years, so no one could ever say there was a single source. No one could ever say it was forged. He was a careful man, your father." Cordelia stared at the cherry wood box. She understood suddenly what she was looking at. She was looking at 30 years of evidence, a complete chain of custody, ownership, use, sale, documentation, the kind of evidence no court could throw out, the kind of evidence a man builds when he knows, deep down, that someone someday will try to take everything. Ruth, why did he give this to you and not to a lawyer? Because lawyers can be bribed, Della. Friends cannot. A pause. And because he trusted me with the one thing he never gave anyone else. What was that? Ruth's eyes filled again. His silence. Cordelia could not speak. Ruth reached across the small table and took her hand. Della, listen to me. Your father did not hide this land because he was greedy. He hid it because he was afraid. He had already lost one woman he loved. He could not bear to lose anything else without a fight. I understand. But the time for hiding is over. The land wants to be known. Your father wants you to claim it, out loud, in daylight, without apology. Cordelia held the old woman's hand. She felt the small earthquakes there, the trembling of a body that had carried a long secret. For a long time. Ruth, I will. I know you will, child. She brought the cherry wood box home in Theron's truck. She set it on the kitchen table next to the metal box. She did not open the letters yet. There were too many of them, and she was too full. She made another cup of bitter coffee. She watched the light change on the parlor wall. She picked up her phone. She called Rosalind. Rose. Della. What is it? Are you all right? Rose, I need you and Frank to come up here, as soon as you can. What happened? Daddy left us something. Della? Rose, Daddy left us something big. A silence. Then her sister said, We'll be there tomorrow. Rosalind and Frank arrived in 48 hours. Rosalind cried when she saw the metal box. She cried harder when she saw the cherry wood box. Frank, a man of few words, sat at the table for 3 hours and read every single document. He took notes. He cross-referenced dates. He measured the maps with a ruler he had brought in his briefcase. When he finally looked up, his eyes were grave. Della, if these reports are even half accurate, those 8 acres are worth more than the rest of the county combined. A pause. And your father knew it. I know. And he hid it for 50 years. I know. Della, the moment word of this gets out, and word always gets out, there will be men, bad men, coming up that drive. Cordelia looked at her brother-in-law. They've already started, Frank. What? She told him. About Mr. Briggs, about the man in the black SUV, about the questions. 2 weeks before she had even known to come. The kitchen got very still. Rosalind set down her coffee cup. Frank sat back, folded his arms, looked out the window, looked back at her. Then we moved quickly. Within a week, Cordelia had hired 2 people. The first was a geologist from Penn State, a young woman with steady hands and a careful mind. She came up, took core samples, disappeared back to her lab, came back 9 days later, set down a thick report. She said one thing. Mrs. Marwood, your father's old friend was right. The calcite was real, high grade, specialty industrial quality, far rarer than the original 1982 report had suggested. The second person Cordelia hired was a lawyer, Alistair Sterling, from Scranton, specialized in mineral rights and quiet title disputes. A man in his 60s with a soft Pennsylvania accent and the eyes of a man who had buried more than one corporation in court. Alistair read the file. He whistled once. Mrs. Marwood, your father was a careful man. Yes. This is the cleanest documentation chain I have seen in 20 years. Good. Whoever comes for this land, and someone will come, they will not win. Not with this in our hands. She nodded. She felt something inside her chest unlock. Just a little. 2 weeks after Theron had pried open the lid, the SUV came. Black, sleek, out of place. Cordelia was on the front porch, sweeping the boards she had repaired the day before. The SUV pulled up the dirt drive, slowly, as if savoring the approach. A man stepped out. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, the kind of man whose shoes had never been muddy. He smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. Mrs. Marwood? That's right. My name is Marcus Vane. I represent Apex Land Holdings. We have been doing some regional scouting. We noticed this property has been dormant for some time. Have you? We would like to make you an offer. $200,000 for the entire 18 acres. Cash. No questions. No. Mrs. Marwood. No. He took a step closer. The smile thinned. It is a generous offer for land in this condition. It is not for sale, and my name is Cordelia Montgomery. He paused, a flicker behind the eyes. Mrs. Marwood, we know a great deal about your situation. We know about the divorce. We know about your financial position. This offer is a lifeline. It is not. If you refuse, we may have to look more closely at the irregularities of your father's old deed. It would be a shame for this to get tangled in court for the next decade. She did not flinch. She gripped the broom. Mr. Vane, get off my land. He looked at her. A long look. Calculating. He nodded slowly, walked back to the SUV, opened the driver's door, paused. He turned, and he said, Regards from Mr. Marwood, Mrs. Marwood. The door slammed. The SUV pulled away. The dust hung in the air. Cordelia stood on the porch, the broom still in her hand. Her ears rang. Garrett. It had always been Garrett, the 15-year trust. The black SUV before she had even arrived. The questions in the general store. He had not just been ending their marriage. He had been cleaning house. For something. For this. She walked to Ruth's house that afternoon. She did not call ahead. She just walked. The roses by the porch were heavy with rain from the night before. The petals dropped one by one as she walked past. Ruth was on the porch, as always, as if she lived in that wicker chair. Cordelia sat down. She did not say anything for a long time. Ruth waited, the way old women wait. Finally, Cordelia said, It was Garrett, all along. I know. He came for the land. I know. He came for me. To get to the land. Ruth reached over, took her hand, did not let go. Della, listen to me carefully. Some men will love a woman to take what she has. Some men will marry her to make sure no one else can. Your father knew that kind of man. He spent his whole life planning around that kind of man. He did not raise you to be afraid of them. He raised you to outlast them. Cordelia closed her eyes. She thought of her father with his shovel, his quiet sails, his 3 Sunday teas, his 30 years of letters in a cherry wood box. A man who had been preparing, quietly, patiently, faithfully, for this exact moment. For her. For now. That night Briar called. Her daughter's voice was small, the voice of a child who has finally understood something. Mom, I'm here, baby. I am sorry. About before. When you called, Briar, I should have come. I should have been there. I told myself I was busy. I told myself you were strong. Briar, listen to me. A pause. The girl was crying. Cordelia took a breath. I am not angry with you, but I want you to learn something from this. Are you listening? Yes, Mom. No one can be the strongest person in the world forever. Not even me. Not even you. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is ask for help before it is too late. Do you understand me? Yes, Mom. I love you, Briar. I love you too, Mom. A small breath on the other end of the line. Mom, are you safe? Yes, baby. I am on the safest piece of ground I have ever stood on. The war began quietly, the way most wars do, not with a battle cry, but with a paper, filed at a county courthouse in Scranton on a Monday morning, stamped, logged, entered into the public record, a petition for quiet title on 8 previously unrecorded acres of land, belonging, as a matter of historical fact and continuous use, to the estate of Henry Montgomery. Alistair Sterling filed it himself. He wore a brown suit, carried an old leather briefcase. He nodded at the clerk, paid the filing fee, walked out into the September sunshine, and just like that, the fight was on. The response came in 72 hours. A motion from Apex Land Holdings, contesting everything. The 1977 survey was 49 years old. They argued it could not be trusted. They argued the land had been abandoned. They argued that any extraction of resources without proper permits was illegal. They argued that Henry Montgomery had committed fraud. They argued that the woman now living in the farmhouse was a schemer, a gold digger, a grieving wife trying to invent a treasure to console herself for her divorce. Cordelia read the motion at her kitchen table. She did not cry. She did not slam the paper down. She read it twice, carefully, the way her father would have read it. Then she handed it back to Alistair. They are afraid. They are. Good. He almost smiled. Mrs. Marwood, I have been doing this for 40 years. I know what fear looks like in a corporate motion. They are throwing everything they have, hoping something sticks. Will it? No. You sound certain. I am certain, because your father was the kind of man who only built things to last. She looked out the window at the ridge. The leaves were beginning to turn, yellow at the tops, working their way down. My father is going to win this case from his grave. Yes, ma'am, he is, but before the trial. There were other things, smaller things, sharper things, things designed to break a woman's nerve. The fence at the back of the property was cut, a clean diagonal, not a coyote, not a bear, a man with a tool. The survey stakes Alistair's office had placed at the corners of the 8 acres were pulled up overnight. Twice, 3 times. The well house lock was tampered with. A false article appeared in a regional weekly newspaper, anonymous source, claiming Henry Montgomery had been a tax evader, claiming he had defrauded the federal government, claiming his daughter was now using forged documents to claim land that belonged to the public. Cordelia read the article on her phone. Her hand shook, but only for a second. She put the phone down. She made coffee. She walked outside. She looked at the mountain. And then she made 3 phone calls, one to Alistair Sterling, one to Roslyn, one to Theron Vaughn. Theron arrived an hour later. He carried a duffel bag. He set it on the porch. Ma'am, Mr. Briggs called me. He thought you might need someone here at night. You don't have to. Yes, ma'am, I do. Theron, I cannot afford to pay you what that's worth. I am not asking you to. Why? He looked away, across the yard, at nothing in particular. I owe your father, Mrs. Marwood. My father has been gone 14 years. I know. What did he do for you? A long pause. Theron's hands hung at his sides. The scar across the back of his left hand was very still. When my father died, I was 8 years old. We had nothing. My mother had no money for the funeral. The funeral home would not bury him without payment. Your father walked into that funeral home and paid the bill in cash. He never told my mother who he was. The funeral director told her years later. She told me when I came home from Iraq. He looked at her. I knew the day Mr. Briggs sent me up here that this was the debt. I have been waiting 24 years to pay it. Cordelia had to sit down. She sat on the top step of the porch. Her father had paid for a stranger's funeral, quietly, and had never told a soul. She thought of all the years she had wondered why he was so often away from home, why he came back so tired, why he carried such heaviness in his shoulders. It was not just calcite he had been moving. It was kindness, quiet, anonymous, expensive kindness that nobody was supposed to know about. Theron slept in the truck the first night. By the second night, Cordelia made him sleep in the parlor. She gave him an old quilt that had belonged to her mother. She cooked. He chopped wood. He patched the fence the intruder had cut. He walked the property line at midnight every night with a flashlight and a slow, deliberate pace. The fence was not cut again. The stakes were not pulled. The well house was not touched. Word travels in small towns, and the word that had begun to travel was this: there is a soldier on the Montgomery farm. Do not test him. The second night Theron stayed. He came into the kitchen at dawn. He set something on the table, a small black recorder, old, battered, the kind of thing that had been to bad places and come home. Mrs. Marwood, there is something I have not told you. All right. Before I worked construction, before the odd jobs, before any of this, I was military police, 10 years. I did investigations. In Iraq, and after I came home, I freelanced for 2 years. Quiet contracts, background checks, surveillance. I was good at it. I am still good at it. She stared at the recorder. Theron, what did you do? 3 weeks ago, I followed Marcus Vane to a coffee shop in Harrisburg. I sat at the table behind him. He met with another man. They had a long conversation. You recorded it. I recorded it. That is not legal in every state. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state, Mrs. Marwood. I was party to the conversation. I sat down at their table. I asked Vane for a sugar packet. I made small talk for 30 seconds. Then I went back to my own table. The recording is admissible. She looked at him for a long time. Theron, why did you do this? Because the day I came up that drive with my crowbar, I knew there were going to be sharks. And I have spent my whole adult life learning what sharks do. What is on the recording? His jaw tightened. Mrs. Marwood, Vane is taking instructions from another man, a man he calls the husband. That man tells Vane to fabricate documents, to plant articles, to pressure you until you break. The man's voice on that recording. I am not a forensic specialist, but to my ear it is consistent with Garrett Marwood. She did not speak. She felt the table under her hands, solid, old, real. She thought of 23 years of breakfasts, of dinner parties, of arguments she had lost because she had been trained to lose. She thought of the man who had loaded a hidden drawer in an antique bureau with papers designed to erase her. And she thought, you are not just a bad husband, Garrett. You are a thief, and you are about to learn that my father raised me to outlast you. She handed the recorder to Alistair Sterling that afternoon. Alistair listened. He listened for a long time. When the recording ended, he set the recorder down on his desk. He looked at her. Mrs. Marwood, your case just got significantly stronger. Will it be enough? Combined with your father's documentation, with Ruth Pemberton's letters, with the lab reports, with the chain of custody. Mrs. Marwood, this is not a case anymore. This is an autopsy. She did not laugh, but something inside her chest loosened. Garrett came in the second week of October, alone. No SUV, no driver, no suit, just an old sedan, coming up the dirt drive at sunset, slowly, as if uncertain. Cordelia was on the porch, snapping green beans into a metal bowl, the first beans from the small kitchen garden Rosalind had helped her plant in August. Theron stepped out of the parlor, stood behind the screen door, said nothing. Garrett got out of the car. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was thinner than she remembered. He had not shaved in 3 days. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps. He did not come up. He did not have the nerve. Cordelia. She did not look up from her beans. Garrett. A long silence. He shifted his weight. He cleared his throat. My brother's firm collapsed. The fund. It collapsed last week. The federal investigators came on Monday. They are looking at me too. They are looking at all of it. She kept snapping the beans. Snap, snap, snap. I am going to lose everything, Cordelia. The house, the trust, all of it. Snap. I am sorry. She set the bowl down. She looked at him for the first time. He looked old, smaller than she remembered, like a balloon a week after the party. You are not sorry, Garrett. You are caught. You are not sorry that you spent 15 years preparing to erase me. You are sorry that the federal government found you before you could finish. Cordelia, please. You sent men to this farm to take this land. You sent them before you had even thrown me out. You sent them while I was ironing your shirts, while I was making your dinner, while I was telling people you were a good man. I made mistakes. You made choices. Mistakes are accidents. You spent 15 years making choices. He looked at the porch boards. He had nothing to say to that. Because there was nothing to say, she stood up. She walked to the top of the porch steps. She did not come down to him. He was not worth descending for. Garrett, you came here to ask for something, so ask. He looked up. I do not know how to start over. I do not know how to be alone. Welcome to 58, he flinched. I am not asking for forgiveness, Cordelia. Good, because you are not getting any. A pause. I just wanted you to know. I am sorry. I really am sorry. She looked at him for a long, long moment. Behind the screen door, Theron stood very still. The sun was sliding behind the ridge. The light on Garrett's face was orange and brief. She felt something inside her settle. Not peace, not yet, but a kind of stillness. Garrett, listen carefully, because I will only say this once. He looked up at her. I am not angry at you anymore. Anger requires that I still see you as someone who could have been better. I do not. I see you as you are. Cordelia, I do not hate you. I do not love you. I do not forgive you. But I do not need to forgive you, to walk away from you. Do you understand the difference? He stared at her. She stared back. You are not going to be the lesson at the end of my life, Garrett. You are just the door I had to walk through, to get to the rest of it. His face crumpled. For a moment, just a moment, he looked like a man who had finally understood something. He turned. He walked back to the sedan. He opened the door. He paused. For what it is worth, your father was right about you. She did not ask what he meant. She did not need to. He got in the car. He drove away. The dust hung in the dirt drive long after the taillights disappeared. She stood on the porch. She picked up the bowl of beans. She kept snapping. Snap, snap, Snap. Because life goes on, with or without ghosts. The trial began on a cold Tuesday in November. The courthouse in Scranton was old, marble columns, heavy wooden doors, a clock that had been keeping time since 1898 and was not impressed by any of them. Cordelia wore a navy dress, simple, the kind of dress a woman wears when she does not want to be looked at, only listened to. Rosalind sat behind her, Frank beside Rosalind. Briar, who had taken 3 days off work and driven up the night before, sat on Rosalind's other side, holding her aunt's hand, across the aisle, the Apex lawyers, 6 of them, in dark suits, with expensive briefcases. Alistair Sterling sat at the plaintiff's table, alone, his one old leather briefcase beside him. He looked across at the 6 lawyers. He almost smiled. "Ready, Mrs. Marwood?" "Ready, Mr. Sterling." Apex went first. They argued for 2 hours. They were polished. They were aggressive. They suggested that the 1977 survey was a forgery. They suggested that Pete Brennan had never existed. They suggested that the lab reports were doctored. They suggested that Cordelia was the unstable wife of a man currently under federal investigation. They suggested that the entire claim was a fraud designed to delay a legitimate corporate acquisition. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the patient eyes of someone who had seen every trick in the book, listened without comment. She took notes. She did not interrupt. When Apex finished, she said, "Mr. Sterling, your response." Alistair stood up. He buttoned his brown suit jacket. He walked to the podium, and he began, with a voice as quiet and patient as a creak over old stones. "Your Honor, my client does not have to prove a forgery, because there is no forgery. My client only has to demonstrate continuous use, documented possession, and proper chain of custody for the property in question. Allow me to begin." And then he destroyed them. He brought out the original 1977 survey, with Pete Brennan's signature, with the surveyor's seal, with the contemporaneous notary stamp. He brought out the 1982 lab report from the Scranton Laboratory, authenticated by the lab's current director, who had personally retrieved the original carbon copy from a bound archive that morning. He brought out the ledger, Henry Montgomery's neat handwriting, 30 years of small sales, names, dates, amounts, receipts. He brought out the cherrywood box, and he brought out the letters. 30 years of letters, from a soft-spoken man to his oldest friend, with every survey notarized, every report witnessed, every sale documented, every milestone certified by a notary public, many of them dead now. But their seals were on the paper, and their signatures were in the records of the state of Pennsylvania. The Apex lawyers shifted in their seats. He brought out Walter Briggs. Walter testified for 40 minutes. He had known Henry Montgomery for 30 years. He had seen Henry come into his store every Saturday morning. He had personally witnessed Henry sell calcite, small loads, by the truckful, to 17 different local contractors over the decades. He named them. He named the years. He named the prices. The Apex lawyers shifted again. Then Alistair brought out Ruth Pemberton. Not in person. Ruth could not travel, but Alistair had taken a video deposition the week before. The judge agreed to allow it. Ruth's old face appeared on the screen. She was in her wicker chair, the shawl around her shoulders. She spoke for 28 minutes. She told the story of Henry Montgomery the way only a 50-year friend could tell it. She told it without drama, without self-importance. She told it the way old women tell true stories, slowly, carefully, with the weight of a long lifetime behind every word. By the time the video ended, 2 members of the jury had wiped their eyes. The apex lawyers stopped shifting. They had stopped breathing. Then Alistair brought out the recorder. The judge listened. The room listened. You could hear, on that recording, Marcus Vane sitting in a coffee shop in Harrisburg, receiving instructions from a voice telling him to fabricate documents, a voice telling him to plant articles, a voice telling him to pressure a 52-year-old woman until she broke, a voice that the audio expert hired by Alistair would identify in his own testimony 2 days later as consistent with Garrett Marwood under accepted forensic standards. The apex lawyers did not even bother with closing arguments. They knew. The whole room knew. It was over. The judge ruled 3 days later. The 8 acres were legally part of the Montgomery estate. The mineral rights were confirmed. The chain of custody was unbroken. Henry Montgomery's careful, decades-long preparation had held, as he had built it to. Apex Land Holdings was fined heavily. Marcus Vane was indicted on 5 counts of fraud and 1 count of attempted extortion. Garrett Marwood, though not a defendant in Cordelia's case, was named in subsequent federal proceedings. The same recording would later play in a different courtroom, with different consequences. Cordelia did not attend that trial. She had a farm to run. The journalists came. She refused them all. A regional television station offered to film a story. A national magazine called Twice. An author wrote her a letter asking to write her book. She said no to everyone. When Alistair asked her why, she shrugged. I did not survive Garrett Marwood and Marcus Vane to spend the rest of my life being the woman who survived them. I am a woman who lives on a farm. That is enough. He nodded slowly. He understood. The contracts came too. Bigger ones, national conglomerates, international mining firms. They offered millions, tens of millions in some cases. Cordelia read every offer, carefully, the way her father would have read them, and then she set every one of them down. She gathered her family at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in early December. Rosalind, Frank, Briar, Theron, Alistair, who had become more friend than counsel, Ruth, who had been driven over by Walter Briggs in his old station wagon. She poured coffee. She set out the offers in a stack. She tapped the stack with one finger. Daddy did not leave us this land to make us rich. He left us this land to make us free. There is a difference. Rosalind's eyes filled. Briar reached for her mother's hand. What do you want to do, Mom? Cordelia smiled, for the first time in 23 years. She smiled the way her father used to smile, quiet, certain, from a place no one could reach but her. I want to keep the mountain whole. She signed a small contract with the Riley family, 4 generations of stoneworkers in northern Pennsylvania. They had been quarrying limestone since 1907. They knew the mountains. They knew the creeks. They knew how to take what was needed without taking what was sacred. The contract specified limited extraction, no more than 2 acres at a time, reforestation, water table protection, no blasting near the creek. A percentage of profit returned to the land in the form of trust-managed conservation funds, a profit share that would keep Cordelia, Rosalind, Briar, and Theron secure for the rest of their lives. But not rich, never rich, because rich was what Garrett had wanted, and Cordelia did not need to want what Garrett had wanted. She had buried that woman in the dirt of an old motel parking lot, in a town in Virginia she would never visit again. The farmhouse was rebuilt that winter, not torn down, not modernized beyond recognition, restored. The sagging porch was lifted and reset. The broken shutters were replaced, but matched to the originals. The roof was redone in cedar shingles. The kitchen got a new wood-burning stove and a small electric one beside it. But the iron bed frame stayed. The hand pump stayed. The cracked window in the parlor was replaced, but the plastic and duct tape were preserved in a small frame on the wall. Above the words, "This is what we started with," the wraparound porch went up in the spring. Wide, generous, big enough for a long table, for long evenings, for the kind of sitting that does not need explanation. She moved into the master bedroom in April. She slept on the iron bed frame, with a real mattress now, and clean sheets, and a window open to the mountain air. She started the Mountain Remembers Fund on a quiet Tuesday in May. She did not name it after her father. She did not name it after herself. She did not name it after anybody. She named it after the truth. The fund supported 3 things, in this order: women over 50 who had been abandoned, abused, or erased by their husbands; emergency housing, legal aid, counseling, a clean motel room, and $92 to start; older women who wanted to return to school, tuition, books, child care for grandchildren, transportation, whatever the woman needed, without judgment, without paperwork that asked her to prove she was suffering enough; family farms in the Appalachian foothills, conservation easements, legal assistance, help against corporate predation. Rosalind ran the finances, Breyer ran the communications, Theron ran the security. Ruth Pemberton was the chair of the honorary board. She did not have to come to meetings. She just had to know that the work was being done. In her name, in Henry's name, in the names of all the soft-spoken people who had carried things for too long, without ever being thanked. A year passed, then another season. October came again. The leaves turned gold and red on the ridge. The creek ran low and clear. The pines smelled like cold and forever. On a warm afternoon, the kind of October afternoon that Pennsylvania saves for women who have earned it, Cordelia sat on the wraparound porch. Beside her was Ruth, 79 now, a little frailer, a little smaller, but still sharp, still patient, still the keeper of every story Cordelia had ever needed to know. The 2 women drank tea. They watched the light shift on the mountain. They did not always speak. They did not need to. In the yard, Breyer was teaching Theron's nephew, a little boy named Jonas, how to whistle through a blade of grass. The boy laughed every time he tried and failed. Breyer laughed every time the boy tried. Rosalind was inside, arguing with Frank about whether the apple pie needed more cinnamon. Walter Briggs sat on the front step, drinking coffee, telling lies about his last fishing trip. To anyone who would listen, Theron was in the small workshop he had built at the edge of the property, working on an engine, singing softly. He had begun to sing this year. Cordelia did not know what had unlocked it. She did not ask. Ruth set her teacup down, looked at Cordelia, reached over, took her hand. "Della." "Yes, you did it. We did it, Ruth. Your father is proud." "I know." A small silence. The wind moved through the pines. "Della, can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I have lived in this valley for 79 years. I have seen many women come up that drive. I have seen many of them leave. Most of them leave the same way they came, with nothing in their hands and nothing in their eyes." She squeezed Cordelia's hand. "You are the first one I have ever seen come up that drive with nothing and leave the right way, without leaving at all." Cordelia did not answer. She just held the old woman's hand. "The way you hold something you have spent your whole life waiting to hold." That evening, after Ruth had been driven home and the dishes had been washed and Briar had gone to bed and Theron had walked the property line one last time, Cordelia stood alone on the porch. The sun went down behind the ridge. The first star appeared, then another, then 100. She thought of the woman who had stood on a sidewalk in suburban Virginia 18 months ago, with a squeaking suitcase and $92 in her pocket. She wanted to reach back through time and put a hand on that woman's shoulder. She wanted to tell her, "You will not believe what is coming. You will not believe how far this goes. You will not believe who you become." But that woman had to walk the road herself, because that is the only way any of us walk it. We do not get rescued from our lives. We grow into them. We bury the women we used to be in the soft, cold ground of our own choosing, and we plant new women in their places. Women who know their names, women who know where they stand, women who will not be moved by any door that closes, by any drawer that opens, by any black SUV that comes up the drive. She thought of her father, Henry Montgomery, the man who had spent 30 years preparing for a day he would not live to see, who had buried a metal box in concrete behind a thicket of brambles, who had handed a cherry wood box to a 50-year friend and said, "When my Della comes home, you will know what to do." She thought of him bending over the soil with his shovel, with his secret, with his quiet, anonymous, expensive love. She whispered into the dark, "Daddy, I am home." The wind moved through the pines. The stars above the ridge were old and bright and steady. The mountain held its silence, the way it had always held its silence. For her, when we travel the long road of a woman's life, we often build our houses on the foundations of other people's expectations. We tell ourselves that if we give enough, love enough, sacrifice enough, the structure will hold us forever. But life has a way of stripping away illusion, sometimes with a cruelty that leaves us standing on the sidewalk of our own existence, wondering where the years went, wondering what we have left. Cordelia Marwood learned what every woman of a certain age must eventually learn, that the strength people praised her for was sometimes just a mask for her fear of being unwanted, that the men who promised to keep us safe are sometimes the men we most need to be saved from, that the people who really love us, sometimes, are the ones we never even knew were watching. From a quiet house at the end of a logging road, from a wicker chair on a porch full of roses, from a metal box buried beneath 30 years of brambles, and from a father, long gone, who loved her in the only language he knew, the language of stone, the language of soil, the language of land that does not lie. White gold is not buried in the limestone of a Pennsylvania mountain. White gold is buried in the courage of a woman who dares to stand up one more time after everything has fallen. White gold is the choice of freedom over wealth, of community over comfort, of dignity over revenge. White gold is the friend who has been guarding your inheritance for 14 years and waiting for you to walk up her road. White gold is the daughter who finally learns that strength is not the absence of asking for help, but the willingness to. White gold is the silent man with the shovel who paid for a stranger's funeral and told no one for 24 years. We are not the ghosts of our worst days. We are the architects of our redemption, standing on solid ground at last, a life finally and truly our own. The mountain remembers her name. It always did, even when she had forgotten it herself.